All right, good morning, everybody. As we're getting settled, welcome to Taxes Committee for April 4th, 2023 at 8:30 in the morning. Thanks, everyone, for being here. A quorum is present. There's coffee and donuts if anybody is hungry. All right, so we're hearing two bills today, the Housing Omnibus Bill and the Education Omnibus Bill. So first up on our agenda is the minutes for March 30th. Vice Chair Norris, do you have a motion?
I move the minutes from the March 30th meeting of the Tax Committee.
All right, Vice Chair Norris has moved the minutes. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries. The minutes for March 30th, 2023 are adopted. All right, so first up is House File 2335. I will just note that the research summary for this bill is in your email inbox. We got a little bit late, and we're in the process of duplicating it, so it'll probably drop sometime during this conversation, hopefully. So, Representative Howard, would you like to move that House File 2335, the first engrossment, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee?
Chair Gomez, I would make that motion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Should we do the author's amendment first, the A12?
Yes, I would move the A12. Chair Gomez, this is a technical amendment with suggestions by the reviser and nonpartisan to the bill.
Excellent. Representative Howard has moved the A12 amendment. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries and the A12 amendment is adopted. So the bill is in the form that the author would like. And Representative Howard to House File 2335.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee, thanks for this opportunity to be here early in the morning. Let's make sure we get those donuts passed around. I'll wait to get mine until after
okay, sounds good.
Get this bill presented. But I am really proud to be before you with what I believe to be the most comprehensive bill to address our affordable housing crisis that this legislature has ever considered, as it should be, because Minnesota has never faced a housing crisis like this, a crisis that's deepening, worsening, and challenging families in our communities like never before. Every year, we aren't building enough homes that are affordable. Housing costs outpace wage growth every year, and so more and more Minnesotans are falling behind and struggling to afford the roof over their head. Specifically, in the 7-county metro area, fully half of all renters are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their income in housing. And last year alone, family homelessness increased in Hennepin County by more than 250%. This is a crisis that demands our urgent and bold action. With the historic surplus, we are seizing the opportunity to make $1 billion in one-time investments in housing. With this, we will build more homes to rent and to own, create housing stabilities for families who would otherwise be on the brink of homelessness, and create more pathways to home ownership. That said, our housing bill includes only a nominal increase in ongoing revenues. And as such, our state budget will continue to largely ignore housing as a general fund priority. Some members have heard me make this analogy before. In our current budget, if our general fund budget was a gallon jug of water, we spend less than a tablespoon on housing. After we've adopted this budget going forward for our outgoing revenues, we're still spending just a tablespoon of our state general fund budget on housing, and that's just not going to cut it. Our housing crisis wasn't created overnight, and it won't be solved overnight either. If we're going to be responsive to the challenges facing Minnesotans who are struggling to afford their home, we need to be bold, bring forward new ideas, and bring a long-term commitment to actually solve this problem. And that is why this bill includes a 1/4-cent metro-wide sales tax dedicated to housing. This is the right approach at the right time, and here's why. First, as I've already mentioned, the extreme needs facing Minnesotans as it relates to the cost of their housing are only growing. As I mentioned, half of renters are cost burdened. That's 170,000 renters in the metro area who are paying more than 30% of their income in housing. This trend line is getting worse, not better. There are 200,000 renters, households that earn under $50,000 annually in the Twin Cities region, and 75% of these households pay more than they can afford for their housing. As I've referenced, we didn't get in this dire moment overnight. really beginning with the Great Recession and the collapse of the housing market, we've entered a 10-plus year stretch. We're not building anywhere near the amount of homes we need. We have a massive supply-demand gap, one of the worst in the country, which is really the big culprit in driving up the cost of housing. And there isn't a magic solution that doesn't involve public investment in the public good of a region and a state where homes are affordable for Minnesotans. The challenge is most pronounced in the metro area for our lowest income renters. Almost 70% of our supply deficit for households at or below 30% of the area median income in the state is attributed in this 7-county metro area. In this session, now is the time to address our long-term challenge. We have to stop admiring the problem and start bringing long-term solutions in this make-or-break moment. The quarter-cent Metro-wide sales tax is a smart tool to address this need. How this would function is the quarter-cent Metro-wide sales tax would be targeted in a manner at the direct housing challenges our constituents and communities face. 3/4 of the resources raised would flow directly to cities and counties to address their unique affordable housing challenges. 1/4 of those resources would fund housing vouchers, a tool that will help eliminate poverty and homelessness more than any other tool we've discussed this legislative session. So what's the impact? The impact of these revenues would be, on average, 1,000 new affordable rental units of housing in a year and 1,000 new affordable homes to own in a year. So over 10 years, we're talking about 20,000 new homes, an impact very significant. The rental voucher piece, we would create housing stability for more than 3,000 families with these vouchers. And I just can't underscore how life-changing, how important to housing stability a rental voucher is for a low-income family. And there's some stories in your packet from folks, and I just want to read one of them from Amanda. Amanda writes to us, she says, I support creating a new Minnesota voucher program because I've personally seen the transformational impact vouchers have. I have 3 kids, and we have experienced homelessness over the last 8 years. What changed all of this is when I received a voucher connected to my unit at Cranberry Ridge in Plymouth. I was able to move into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit that provided enough space and stability for my family. My kids now go to Wayzata schools, and it has a big impact on their lives. My youngest daughter is in the 1st grade, and after missing half of kindergarten, she started not being able to read or write. Now she's completely caught up. Now my girl can read a whole book and write her name. My middle schooler has special education needs, and having a stable home has improved his emotional and social skills. He now has the confidence to be in the same classroom as his peers. My oldest son now gets to just be a high schooler, hang out with his friends, and playing on the football team. All of this is possible for my family because of having a voucher. This bill will be transformational for families with positive ripple benefits for our kids, for our communities, for the health and economic wellness of families and our communities as a whole. The benefits far outweigh the costs. I want to take on what could be a potential criticism of the bill, that a sales tax is regressive and a potential burden on our low-income families. But we have to look at both sides of the ledger here. It's important to note that the wealthier Minnesotans will pay a larger share of this sales tax. According to the Minnesota Department of Revenue's latest tax incidence study, households in the top 10% of income distribution paid about $5,900 per year in state sales tax compared to just $700 for households in the lowest decile. And let's put that against the fact that I've mentioned that half of Minnesota renters in the metro area are paying more than 30% of their income in housing. It's more aggressive than a sales tax, the cost of housing, and it gets worse year over year if we don't address it. In closing, this bill and its vision has support that's growing. Along with the public testifiers you'll hear in the letters in your packet, I want to note that 24 local elected officials from across the metro area, some that will testify, have signed on to a letter of support. Members, this is the right time to be serious about solving our housing crisis, not just now, but into the future. And so I welcome the discussion today.
Thank you so much, Chair Howard. So we're going to do public testimony, and then we'll go to member discussion. As we're kind of, the reason that the Housing Omnibus Bill is in front of the Tax Committee, of course, is because of the quarter-cent metro-wide sales tax, and so we'll ask kind of our testifiers to keep it brief, to stay focused on the tax provisions in the bill, and hope that we can stay pretty focused on tax provisions when we move to member testimony. So first up is Commissioner Irene Fernando. Welcome to the committee, Commissioner. Please just introduce yourself as you get started with your testimony.
Chair Gomez, Chair Howard, representatives, thanks for the time to speak. I'm Commissioner Irene Fernando, use she, her pronouns, and chair of the Hennepin County Board. I'm the first Filipino-American elected in Minnesota. I'm the youngest woman to serve on the Hennepin Board, and I'm our first board chair of color in 171 years. Communities across Minnesota are struggling as housing costs continue to rise faster than wages, on top of costs for food, healthcare, bills, and education. Residents most impacted are those who can least afford it: seniors, youth, BIPOC families, and immigrant households. In the 7-county metro, almost 325,000 households are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their income toward housing. Hennepin has implemented affordable housing for decades, but the need grows. Our last funding round received $33 million in requests for $8 million available. Since the end of the statewide emergency rental assistance program, the number of families entering our shelter system outpaced the number of families exiting at a rate of 2 to 1. Hennepin commits to shelter all families because no child should be out in the cold. Today, there are over 250 families and 500 children in our shelters. This is 300 more children than this time last year. Data shows the most effective way to prevent shelter is to keep people housed through vouchers and rental assistance. I cannot stress enough the urgency of this moment and the need for state partnership to build more affordable housing and to scale rental assistance. Hennepin has prioritized housing stability for our lowest income residents through local funds and federal relief nearing $100 million. And this model is working. But we need ongoing funding because one-time money will only delay the problem, not solve it. Please support the Metro sales tax to provide dedicated revenue to meet our housing crisis, while also improving outcomes in health, education, and employment, changing the trajectory of what's possible for Minnesotans today and future generations. Chair and members, thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Commissioner Fernando. Next up, Libby Murphy. Welcome to the committee.
Chair Gomez, committee members, my name is Libby Murphy. I'm the Director of Policy at the Minnesota Housing Partnership. For nearly 30 years, MHP has worked directly with communities to help them meet their housing and community development goals. To reduce the gap between the number of multifamily and single-family homes that are available and affordable to households, reduce housing cost burden, and prevent and end evictions and homelessness, Minnesota must expand rental assistance and add more housing units. Community housing goals will feel increasingly unattainable if Minnesota continues to underinvest in housing. We need dedicated revenue to provide rental assistance and capital for new housing production. In 2018, MHP identified the need for $1 billion per year for at least 10 years to meet the 7-county Twin Cities region housing needs for households with the lowest incomes. From 2000 to 2019, only 8,529 affordable units were created in the metro, and only 631 of these units were affordable to households making less than 30% of area median income. The result is housing cost burden in the region increased from 36 to 45% in the same time period. At the same time, the metro also saw a loss of naturally occurring affordable housing. While a sales tax is regressive, you cannot ignore the fact that low-income Minnesotans are paying a disproportionate share of their incomes on housing. 88% of households making less than 50% of area median income pay more than half of their income on housing, whereas only 4% of households making more than 50% of area median income are experiencing severe cost burden. This is a silent housing tax that low-income Minnesotans pay. Households with low income are essentially paying a massive tax as a result of restrictive building policies and funding decisions that have underinvested in housing at the state, federal, and local levels. And for households in 3 of the top 5 in-demand jobs in the region, this means paying several $1,000s more than they can afford per year on rent. We need more predictable, dedicated funding to meet statewide needs, and MHP is advocating for a statewide constitutional amendment to raise revenue for affordable housing. But House File 2335 is a targeted stream of dedicated funds to provide housing in an area of the state that has tremendous housing needs. A dedicated revenue source provides an ongoing committed stream that is desperately needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is Micah Cody. Welcome to the committee. Please just introduce yourself as you're getting started with your testimony.
Cool beans. Thank you, Chair Gomez. Thank you, Representative Howard, members of the committee. My name is Micah Cody, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my support for House File 2335. I'm currently a college student. I'm also a shelter advocate and someone who has also grown up experiencing housing insecurity. Through this legislative session, I've sat through so many meetings, but in all of these meetings, all I kept hearing about was this was the session where we could finally get things done. With House File 2335, we will be putting something in place that needs more than one-time money for it to continue impacting people positively after. Members of the committee, I'm asking you today to please tax me. I'm a student currently, and even though I would pay more in sales tax, I'm willing to support House File 2335 because in the long term, I see this as a way to create the housing infrastructure that we so desperately need, long after the surplus we currently have is gone. I am grateful for the family I was born into, but majority of my lived experience with my family, I have experience with my family, housing insecurity. Not knowing where you're going to sleep the next day makes it really hard for you to focus on academics. Makes it really hard for you to wonder when your next meal is coming. I work in a homeless shelter currently. Every day I see families torn apart because of the poor housing infrastructure that we currently have in place. I know that taxpayers pay a lot more for individuals and families in an emergency shelter than they would towards safe and affordable permanent housing. House File 2335 is dedicated revenue for a long-term solution for a long-term problem. Now, I understand that this is just a start to helping us out of this current predicament, but I like to stay optimistic and say it's a start. We're not done yet. This is my closing. I'm not here today to just share my story with you. I'm here today to talk to you about solutions towards my lived experience. Thank you, and please support House File 2335.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it. Next up is Patricia Nauman.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Patricia Nauman. I'm the Executive Director of Metro Cities, representing cities in the 7-county metropolitan area at the state legislature and executive branch. I just want to first of all thank Representative Howard for a very robust housing bill that does contain funding for a variety of state programs that Metro Cities has long supported. Given that this is the tax committee and tax issues are under consideration, I do just want to note that Metro Cities is opposed to the language that would create a metropolitan-wide regional sales and use tax for housing assistance programs. Generally speaking, Metro Cities policies do oppose financing of programs that have statewide value and significance and traditionally are funded with state revenue, such as housing with local revenue sources. Metro Cities further opposes substituting traditionally funded programs such as housing with funding mechanisms that would disparately affect taxpayers in the metropolitan region. I do just want to note again that programs and resources to address housing do serve important state goals and objectives, and as such should be financed with traditional state sources. And Metro Cities has again long supported those traditional sources for housing programs across their array that provide very effective support, but that tend to be oversubscribed. Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and thank you again to Representative Howard for his work on this bill.
Thank you. Next up is Ben Helvig Anderson. Welcome to the committee. Please just say your name as you're getting started with your testimony.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you. My name is Ben Helvig Anderson, and I'm the Vice President of Policy and Organizing at Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. We are here in support of House Bill 2335 as a historic investment across the housing continuum that will move the state forward. Beacon is a nonprofit that creates homes for those with the lowest income, maintains quality housing, and organizes so that all people have a home. We are a lead organization in Bring It Home Minnesota campaign. We thank Representative Howard for lifting up one of our residents' voices, Amanda, in his opening. She hoped she could be here actually to share her testimony, but could not. We're also a member of the Homes for All Housing Coalition, which also supports this bill, and the Metro sales tax. We applaud the inclusion of rental assistance envisioned by Bring It Home Minnesota campaign, paid for by a new Metro sales tax. Rental assistance is one of the primary solutions to the housing crisis that our state urgently needs, and it requires dedicated revenue. A sales tax creates a steady stream of revenue of assistance for those who need it the most. Over 214,000 Minnesota renter households sacrifice necessities like food and health care daily because they cannot afford their rent. This bill creates needed vouchers that are transformational. By creating a voucher, you stabilize a family's lives, allowing them only to pay 30% of their income to housing. This stability allows kids to do better in school, seniors to be healthier, and adults to move out of survival mode. Every new voucher put into the community has ripple effects for the people and institutions and community that person touches. Rental assistance is truly transformational. Every tax is a trade-off between cost and benefits. The sales tax costs will be spread out among all Metro residents, while the tax will directly assist households that need it the most. With a record number of families experiencing homelessness and evictions on the rise, we urgently need a solution to stabilize households. Rental assistance through housing vouchers is that solution. It is financially worth everyone in the Metro paying a little more to stabilize and keep housed the residents who need it the most. Beacon also supports the local government aid portion of this tax, which will also be transformational in creating new homes. These two resources, housing vouchers and local government aid together, will allow developers like Beacon to build more deeply affordable homes that serve folks under the 30% of the area median income, the homes most needed in our region. The Metro sales tax will be worth it overall. There is a housing crisis, and the state is not spending enough to move a solution forward. And housing needs dedicated resources. This bill is a good start to creating those dedicated resources and a start to the Bring It Home Minnesota program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up is Jen Westmoreland. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Chair Gomez and committee members. My name is Jen Westmoreland. My pronouns are she, her. It's an honor to testify in my individual capacity as chair of the Hopkins School Board. I'm also a member of the Heading Home Hennepin Executive Committee through the county. Safe and stable housing is a human right that is denied to far too many of our community members. Our current housing crisis directly impacts students and their families in the Hopkins School District. Study after study has shown that stable housing is one of the greatest predictors of both student wellness and student academic achievement. This is why I'm deeply concerned that the number of highly mobile and unhoused students in our district has increased steadily over the past 3 years. For 2 years during the pandemic, my family was doubled up with another Hopkins family in the same house. My friend who lived with us during that time has given me permission to share her story with you. She's a single mother of a current 6th grader in Hopkins schools. My friend is what I like to call a celebrity bus driver. All of the kids in the district know who she is, and the lucky ones who get to be on her bus route, she calls her bus babies. Despite working a full-time job serving kids, in addition to part-time jobs to supplement her income, she has struggled to find stable housing that she can afford in the community she serves. Stories like my friend's are far too common, and you have the power to change that by supporting House File 2335, including the metro area affordable housing sales tax. This will open up access to safe and dignified housing for students and their families so that they can find stability and thrive. Thank you for your time and for your important work.
Thank you very much, Chair Westmoreland. That concludes the testimony or the testifiers that I have signed up. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on House File 2335?
There's one over there, Madam Chair. There.
Okay, great. Come on down. If you wouldn't mind just identifying yourself for the record as you start with your testimony. Thank you so much.
Hello, good morning. My name is Darwin Schaeferlane. I am a Bloomington resident. I have nothing prepared for this, but I want to say hearing everybody's testimony in support of this bill has made me realize, wow, we desperately need a comprehensive housing plan in this state. With the political will and the possibilities that are here in this state, we should be looking forward to a future where everybody should be guaranteed the right to housing. This is something that is non-negotiable if we want a future that is sustainable for all Minnesotans. I am fortunate enough to live in a house that is paid off, but I can't say the same for all of my friends and family. I know people who live in the state that are struggling to afford their rents right now as prices go up. And we are measurably one of the most affordable regions in the United States, but we are still struggling with a lack of supply. Being able to remove things like outdated zoning laws, being able to permit more construction of units, especially ones that are affordable, being able to increase that supply will bring down rents. It is already working. The Twin Cities is being able to fight the rent increases through being able to construct more supply. This is simple economics. And that is a matter of being able to guarantee every single Minnesotan has the ability to afford a home and not have it eat their entire paycheck. I see this with my own partner, with them living paycheck to paycheck on $14 an hour while struggling to afford the rent that ever so increases. Thankfully, there are options, but that can only happen by giving us more supply. I desperately support this committee to approve the taxes being provided towards affordable housing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Please just say your name for the record as you're getting started with your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. My name is Katie Nicholson, much like my associate Darwin, who spoke before me. I don't really have anything prepared for this, but I do also want to extend my support for a sales tax increase to fund housing. Yeah, much of the same thing. I see people struggling. I mean, I've also personally, you know, a good chunk of my income is going to my rent right now. And, you know, even if it's not a whole lot, it is increasing. We just got to notice that our rent is increasing. And even when those rents increase, I'm probably not going to see any of the benefits of it. But I am definitely in support of more housing. We need a sales tax, and we also need to start funding more housing, more projects like the one that's currently being built in my neighborhood of Highland Park, Highland Bridge. There are a lot of spaces that we can fill in with more housing near transit lines. I hope that everybody here supports this tax, this sales tax. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Not seeing any, we'll go to member discussion. First up, Representative Swedzinski.
Oh.
Or
Sounds good.
Either way.
Madam Chair, I didn't realize it was the first one, but sure, I'm ready to go.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just taking a glance at the bill before us, you know, oftentimes when we do local option sales tax, there is an election. When will be the voters of the metro area be allowed to vote whether or not this is imposed on them?
Representative Howard.
Chair Gomez, Representative Swedzinski, there's no piece of that in this bill.
Representative Swedzinski.
Madam Chair, so the voters of the metro area won't be allowed to vote on this, like a normal sales tax that's imposed on a particular area?
Representative Howard?
Chair Gomez, and if you want, we can go to nonpartisan, but that's correct. That's not part of the bill.
Ms. Hagler, do you have any information to share with us about the difference between a metro sales tax and a local option sales tax and the requirements for those?
Madam Chair and members, this tax being proposed by this bill is a little bit different in that there is no referendum requirement for this. It operates a little bit like a county transportation tax, where the counties have the ability to impose that without a referendum requirement. Most counties have the 0.25 or 0.5%. So this would just be a tax imposed by, I believe, Met Council whenever they're able to get it up and running.
Representative Swedzinski.
Madam Chair, and just a follow-up to Ms. Hagler. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
I don't say it often, so I want to make sure. Could we insert that in this bill, Madam Chair? Ms. Hagler?
Ms. Hagler. Well, hold on. Representative Swedzinski, insert what?
To allow the voters of the metro area to actually have a vote on this, whether or not this is a priority for them.
I'll go to Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, I think the operation would be a little bit difficult, but that, of course, would be up to the legislature to decide that's a requirement that you'd like to impose.
I'll just note that since the metro is not itself like one political unit, that it would be really difficult and not aligned with precedent, as I understand it, to add such a provision to, but I'll go to, I don't know if Representative Howard, if you have anything you want me to go back to. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just what area is the metro?
Representative Howard.
Chair Gomez, Representative Swedzinski, it's defined as the 7-county metro area in this bill.
Representative Swedzinski.
Madam Chair, it seems like it'd be pretty easy to just allow this on the next referendum to allow those 7 counties that reside in those 7 counties to have a vote. If the people, we've heard from the testimony that this is a great thing, that this should move forward. I think, Madam Chair, Representative Howard, why are we afraid to let those 7 counties vote on this?
Sounds like a statement, but I don't know, Representative Howard, if you have.
Chair Gomez, Representative Swedzinski, I'd actually be open to a conversation about it, honestly. I think there's support for something like this. I do think that it, to the chair's point about the regional basis of this, I think there's precedent and it's not a necessary step. The needs are urgent, and I think that when you look at how this would be implemented and the timing of such, I'm not sure it's necessary, but happy to have a conversation about it.
Representative Swedzinski.
Well, Madam Chair, Representative Howard, I think that would be important. I think that way the voters could make a statement. We've heard from testimony that it's a very important issue, that folks feel like it's a human right, which I do not. Others providing housing for someone else is not a human right. You can't force someone else's labor or investment. That's not how human rights work. That's not how things work. But anyway, I think you should definitely look at that. I think you'd get a lot more support potentially for the bill if you allowed the people to actually vote on it. If there is as much support as the testimony states across the board, I think that would be a healthy part of the discussion in a coming November. And then to fiscal staff, my question is, what percentage, when we look at tax incident studies, we look at what's the outside and the inside. So if a local option sales tax is being presented to the legislature for a regional center, we often look at what percentage of those taxes come from outside of that region versus what is paid for by folks that reside within that region. What is in the study for the sales tax for how many people would commute into the metro and then pay this extra quarter percentile to help support housing that they don't have anything to do with versus what the folks that live inside? Do we know those numbers?
That was to fiscal staff. I think that's probably outside of the information that we have about the bill, but I will go to Ms. Templin.
Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, the tax incidence report by the Department of Revenue does have local sales tax incidence information and estimates. It is not in it. The analysis that they have is not concentrated on geographic areas, but it is statewide local sales tax information. And that report does have information about shifting or the amount of taxes that are exported. To answer the question specifically, I would need to just consult that report and get you the specific information later, if that would be okay.
Thank you, Ms. Templin. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Templin. I appreciate it. I didn't expect you to have that off the tip of your tongue, but my guess is it's anywhere from 40 to 60%. On average, that's what we see, unless you're the city of Bloomington, which has the Mall of America. I think their importation is 75% of sales taxes that are brought in from outside of the city of Bloomington because of the Mall of America and whatever. But, I think that's one of the part of this conversation is one, we're not allowing the voters to actually vote on this, and two, a vast majority of the taxes that are going to be paid are folks that don't even live in the 7-county metro, that actually voted with their feet, that they said themselves, I can't afford to live in the metro, so I'm going to commute into it to work. And those folks are going to be forced when they go pay for their not their groceries, but if they're going to be purchasing something, whatever, they're going to be forced to pay this tax that they had no ability to vote on, and we don't even allow the folks that live there to vote on it. And I think those two things alone are, just foundationally, we're overstepping our bounds as a legislature here. I know we've potentially done this in the past. And then my next question is kind of get down to the basis of just how this voucher will work. How much of a person's rent will be paid by the vouchers? Like, is there a percentage that the person will be eligible for by getting this free rent money?
We're getting a little bit outside of the metro sales tax. I mean, it's fine. I'll let Representative Howard answer your question.
Madam Chair,
Swedzinski.
all of the testimony that the bill author brought to the testifying table dealt with all the ancillary things except the actual sales tax when they presented on the bill. And
Representative Swedzinski, those are the testifiers. I will allow Representative Howard to answer your question. I want us to stay pretty confined to the tax provisions of the bill. But Representative Howard.
Chair Gomez, Representative Swedzinski. So how these vouchers would work is similar to how the Section 8 voucher system works at the federal government. And just for some context there, statewide, there are over 200,000 Minnesotans that qualify right now for a Section 8 voucher, but only a quarter of those folks actually receive it because the federal government has never adequately funded that program. And so the eligibility is similar, and it's structured in a way that the renter wouldn't pay more than 30% of their income in housing. So they would cover a portion, the voucher would cover the other portion. And there are limits in terms of the end amount of rent. It's a fair market rent standard in terms of, what are sort of the places that somebody could rent. And so it varies based a little bit about that in terms of what the end amount of the rent is. But the voucher holder would pay a portion, and then the voucher piece would cover the remainder. And like Section 8, those resources would go directly to the landlord in terms of covering that cost.
And we did just receive the House research overview, but there's info on pages 4 and 5 about this program. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just kind of wrap up. And this would be a question to nonpartisan staff. So if this operates the same way as a voucher, how will the renter's credit react with this particular new program within the metro area?
Mr. Cope, or should we, Mr. Williams, maybe? Do you want to come up and talk about the renter's credit and the interactions? Mr. Williams.
Chair Gomez and Representative Swedzinski, the rent, gross rent paid for the purposes of calculating your renter's credit is based on actual rent paid in cash. So any amount of rent paid by the voucher would not count towards the calculation of the renter's credit.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you. That's what I figured. I appreciate that. And think most of my questions would be outside of the tax area, but Representative Howard, I would recommend that we are open to that conversation of allowing the voters of this area to, especially with whatever information Ms. Templin gives to the committee. I think that's an important part of this, as far as showing importance and need and want of this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Howard. So I'm going to try and just stay on the Article 5 stuff. So I've had a similar concern that Representative Swazinski raised. So in Article 5, the sales tax, that's not used for these vouchers. That's just used for people in cities and counties for qualified projects that are listed in this. Am I correct?
Representative Howard.
Chair Gomez, Representative Robbins, of the tax that's collected, 3/4 of it would go to counties and cities, as you mentioned. A quarter of it would fund vouchers in the metro-based area. It would fund in the ballpark of 3,000 vouchers in the 7-county metro area.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. Can you just show me where in the bill that is?
Representative Howard. We'll go to Mr. Cope.
Madam Chair, Representative Robbins, Justin Cope, House Research. That's on page 44, line 20 of the bill.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. So that goes to vouchers for rental assistance only, correct?
Mr. Cope.
Madam Chair, Representative Robbins, yes, that's correct.
Perfect.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. So then my next question is on line 46.1 is the grants to 2-tier cities. And I mean, there's no clarification on how much will go to this grant program. Could you elaborate on that for me?
Representative Howard.
Chair Gomez, Representative Robbins, I don't think we have it in our packets, but I think we do have some preliminary runs and estimates in terms of what the sort of fund allocation looks like, and we can get that to you.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. Because I would just like to point out that generally the cities I represent get left out of these kind of programs. So I have Loretto, I have Greenfield, I have Independence, Maple Plain. They're all very small cities here in the metro that are routinely left out of this. And just to give a shout out to Dayton, I used to represent them, and they fall in that same sort of no man's land. So understanding this grant program and how they get treated is very important to me. So I just wanted to raise that. And, I just want to align myself with Representative Swazinski's comments about raising a tax without any voter approval. That's already been one of our huge frustrations with the Met Council. And now we're doubling down on that because we as the state are telling the Met Council they must raise the tax. And I really think voters are already feeling so stressed with inflation and the cost of living and what they're paying for all the other taxes. This bill, I believe the bills we're looking at today will raise $7.3 billion in taxes, and we haven't even seen the tax bill yet. I just encourage the committee to take a deep breath on all the taxes we are raising on Minnesotans in this state when we have a huge surplus and when the economy is, not looking great. And we really have to be mindful of the tax burden on our constituents and how it affects their daily lives. And I think some of the other statewide housing assistance programs are great, and we should continue to fund those, but I do not think adding an additional tax burden is the right method to think about improving housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further member discussion? Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Howard, for bringing this forward. You and I have worked really hard on trying to figure out the best ways to meet the housing needs, both across the state and particularly in the metro area, where we have a significant number of Minnesota residents who are struggling mightily with their housing. Housing is one of the largest costs, and so when we think about the burdens that people are facing, I think in addition to being prudent with taxes, we also need to be prudent with understanding the costs that people are facing. So I appreciate thinking through the sales tax. I also appreciate the fact that it will both go towards the voucher system as well as additional projects for building that we know that we need across both the metro area. I don't really have a question per se, but I do want to say that as much as we've had a really strong conversation here about, how voters should be involved, I think one of the first ways voters were already involved was in electing all of us to help be their voices here and to also come up here. We heard many testifiers already come up and express their interest in something like this. So I do think that at least that is one way that we are hearing from the people of both the metro area and the state of Minnesota that this is important to them. So thanks.
All right, is there any further member discussion? Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just make one final comment before we move on. The analogy was used about a gallon of water and what percentage of the government spends on housing. And I think one thing that if you think of rental assistance like oil and water, those two things are separate. And by increasing the amount of government spending in this particular area, all we're going to do is raise rents on everybody else. So those 3,000 vouchers that go out into the market, that's simply going to be like pouring oil into a 2-gallon jug of water that has a gallon of water in it. All that water is not going to get displaced, it's not going to get up, it's just going to lift up. And so the water will settle to the bottom, which is the voucher, and all the rents will rise across the metro. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further member discussion, I'll go to Representative Howard for some closing comments.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee, Representative Swedzinski, I love a good analogy. I must admit, I'm struggling with that one. What I would say, just in closing, I do appreciate the discussion. I think that the thesis of this bill is that we need to take a yes and approach to our housing crisis. And the way we're going to bring down the cost of housing is to, one, target our massive supply-demand mismatch, one of our nation's worst. It's just, economics 101. We need to build more homes at various affordable levels, and that's what this bill will help do. And lastly, I think there's a strong economic case to doing this. One of the Twin Cities region's economic competitive edges, when you look nationally, is that we relatively have an affordable region. There's other regions in this country that have lost this battle. They didn't pay attention, and it's over. There is not affordable homes in Seattle, in San Francisco, in Denver. We have an opportunity, but it is right now. This is our time to address it, and that's why now is the time to do something like this that is serious about addressing our long-term housing needs. And with that, I appreciate the support of the committee.
All right, with that, Representative Howard is going to renew his motion that House File 2335, the first engrossment, as amended, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. Motion prevails, and House File 2335, the first engrossment, as amended, is on its way to Ways and Means. Thank you, Chair Howard.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope there's some donuts left.
All right, next up. I'm sorry, I didn't say this at the beginning of committee, but we're doing a little bit of a split thing today. The transportation bill is not yet in our committee's possession, so we're going to break at 10:10 for floor session, after which time the transportation bill will be in the possession of the tax committee, and then we'll reconvene after floor, we think about 30 minutes after, to finish our committee's work for the day. But before we break, we're thrilled to have Chair Youakim with us to present House File 2497, the first engrossment. Representative Youakim, would you like to move that House File 2497, the first engrossment, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would.
Excellent. And I understand, Chair Youakim, there is an author's amendment, the A9. Would you like to move your amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the A9 amendment.
Excellent. Representative Youakim has moved the A9 amendment. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair, would you like me to describe the amendment?
Absolutely. That would be great. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. So the A9 amendment is the correction needed for a levy impact on one of the bill provisions that is not calculated. The provision extends special education services to students until their 22nd birthday. Under current law, children with disabilities are only eligible for special ed services until July 1st following their 21st birthday. So this change aligns statute with the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Act, which requires services to be available to students with disabilities until their 22nd birthday. Members, we're a zero levy target. This bill does not raise taxes. Education bill does not raise taxes. So this is to make adjustments so that we stick to that zero levy target.
Great, thank you for that description, Chair Youakim. So Representative Youakim has moved the A9 amendment. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion is adopted, and the A9 has been, amendment has been adopted. Representative Youakim, to your bill.
Thank you. Members, very briefly, I will explain the bill before you. It was crafted by members of the House Education Finance Committee and the House Education Policy Committee. With this proposal, we make historic investments in our schools. We ensure that the learning environments in our schools, communities work for all of our students and ensure that our teachers, principals, and administrators have the tools they need to meet students where they're at. We've had over 20 years of underinvestment in our schools. While we cannot change that overnight or even in one biennium, this bill is an incredible start. Our proposal stabilizes school funding, supports the health and well-being of our students, works on equity and innovation in our schools, increases career pathways and connections with local communities, as well as builds up and diversifies our workforce. Members, in this bill, you'll find investments in our schools to stabilize their budgets so they can plan for the future. I will hit just a few of the highlights. We increased the general education formula by 4% the first year and 2% the second year, as well as indexing the formula to inflation with a 3% cap in the second biennium. The bill tackles 50% of the special education cross subsidy, and by 2027 tackles 100% of the English language learner cross subsidy. This proposal also increases the transportation sparsity aid from 18.2% to 40% in order to help school districts who have to transport students very long distances. In this bill, there are a variety of ways we invest in the health and well-being of our students. We put just over $11 million in the base into expanding full-service community schools. We invest in increasing our school support staff, our social workers, our counselors, our psychologists, and school nurses, as well as invest in money in a pipeline for that same workforce. We use an entire article in this bill to focus on literacy, using the READ Act as a base and blending it with the governor's bold proposal so that the package works for students, for all of our students in our schools. There's money included in this for teachers training, as well as for curriculum grants. There are a variety of innovative ways that we invest in our schools' academic climate with a variety of different types of grants, before and after school and during. We also provide funding to help schools teach to the upcoming social studies standards and the area of Holocaust and ethnic studies, as well as begin work around financial literacy and computer science. We build connections with community by investing in our after-school programming, community education, adult basic education, and our regional and county libraries. There are investments in career and technical education for a variety of careers from EMS and STEM to aviation and ground transportation. And we provide additional money for our consortiums across the state to coordinate increased investments in CTE programming in order to give our districts a hand that might not be able to do that themselves. This bill provides money for our schools' infrastructure, both human and physical. There are dollars to increase teachers of color and Indigenous teachers in our classrooms, as well as increasing our workforce in special education. We provide money to the Professional Educator Licensing Standards Board to streamline the portfolio process and policy to make it easier for teachers to stay in the classroom in areas where there are shortages. We also provide money to increase training for our paraprofessionals and ESPs and provide added time for our special education teachers to complete IEPs. And finally, we provide funding to the Minnesota Department of Education to build up our MTSS and COMPASS program and develop an Office of Inspector General to increase oversight of state dollars that go into our schools. Now back to why we're in the tax committee this morning. There are 4 provisions of this bill as amended that impact local levies. Expanding the number of voluntary pre-K seats, allowing school districts to levy for facility needs of cooperative units and joint power districts, allowing districts to use long-term facility maintenance revenue for HVAC renovation projects,
and ensuring that children with disabilities can continue to receive special ed services until their 22nd birthday. The levy costs associated with these 4 provisions total approximately $21 million per year, beginning in fiscal year 2025. Since the House Education Committee cannot increase property taxes, we have a 0 levy target. So that means any changes that we make in policy and funding that interact with one of the education levies, we must pay for from state aid. In other words, as an appropriation from the general fund. The smaller spreadsheet you have in your packets, labeled the 2023 House K-12 Education Finance Bill Levy Impact, shows which portions of the bill interact with levies and how it's paid for in aid. We use general fund money to neutralize levy impacts by increasing equalization for both the local option and operating capital revenue levies. So members, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Chair Youakim. I don't have any testifiers signed up, but if there's anyone present who wishes to testify, please go ahead. All right, round 2, baby, as we say. Please introduce yourself once again for the record and go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Darwin Schaeferlin. I am the aforementioned Bloomington resident. I also am here to testify, just impromptu. I had nothing prepared for this, but I want to be here in support of this bill as somebody who is a public education graduate, somebody who was a special education student for many years, and who has a stepmother who teaches in kindergarten and elementary school special education, who also happens to be one of the city council members of Wyoming, Minnesota. And one of the biggest issues with our state's quite great education system compared to the rest of the country is the fact that our funding sources are incredibly regressive for education in this country. Property taxes have to pay for most of what education is being funded by in this state, especially in smaller cities, where those property taxes are constantly being fought by local residents. And it is extremely hard to fund education systems, especially in schools across this state in the greater Minnesota region, where there are much less revenues coming in from these property taxes, and the schools are a lot worse off than some of the ones in the Twin Cities area. I can attest personally that we moved to Bloomington in part because of the fact that the schools in Bloomington are significantly better than some of the other areas in Minnesota and are funded much better. But even then, there are still shortcomings on Bloomington's behalf as a school network that could very desperately be fixed by this bill. And I'm here to testify and just overall say that on behalf of my stepmom, on behalf of everybody in the state who is a special education student in particular, we strongly support this bill and improving our schools' funding sources. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? All right, seeing none, we'll go to member discussion. Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Youakim, for presenting the education omnibus bill. And I do want to thank you for your amendment, which helps with a little bit with the local levy issue and some of these other things. I have a few questions. The referendum levy renewal, this provision allows local school districts to essentially not have to go back to voters for levy renewals in the future. Do we have any sort of, maybe it's a fiscal staff question, do we have any numbers about how much that is statewide?
Chair Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What you should remember about Representative Frazier's bill is that it can only extend a levy that's already been voted on, and it can't increase that levy. And if they choose to renew it for a few more years, they have to go back and have a school board meeting, and people can have their say in it. So there's no per se runs on how that's increased or like how that would be affected, because it is all up to local control.
Representative Anderson, do you want me to ask if,
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Swanson, I'm so sorry.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, so I don't have a breakdown of the total amount of certified levies that are voter approved versus non-voter approved in front of me. Mr. Strom or Ms. Beckel might have that more readily at hand, but we can certainly get that number.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanson. Ms. Beckel, I know is maybe a little more of our education person, so Ms. Beckel.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Solveig Beckel, House Fiscal. I don't have runs per se, but a fiscal note was requested on this, and the fiscal note came back with zero cost because there were no referendum renewals that in the time period that they used to estimate these costs that were not renewed.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you. It would be good to get that information as this goes forward. My other question, as we know, there are 65 new mandates in this bill for local school districts. Specifically the unemployment benefits, which was House File 20 originally, the estimated cost to school districts is about $135 million statewide. Was there discussion about funding this, or are we planning to leave this as an unfunded mandate?
Yeah, so that is probably not within the purview of the tax provisions. I also just wanted, I saw that but I'll go to Representative Youakim. We want to kind of like, this will continue to get full kind of conversation about the fiscal and policy implications like directly in the education committees. But I just noticed that Ms. Schill did, I think, have a comment on your previous question. So we'll go to her and then I'll just go back to Chair Youakim, if that's okay with you, Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ms. Schill.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, in your packet there is a revenue estimate, not a fiscal note, but a revenue estimate for this bill that takes a look at the property tax interactions only. And it basically says the proposed changes to the school net tax capacity based and referendum market value based levies net to zero. So you have that information.
Thank you. All right, and to Chair Youakim.
Thank you. And one of the things I wanted to kind of clarify too, with that, I love that the testifier came up and talked, but about 80 to 85% of our funding going into our schools actually is from our general fund. And the excess operating levy, the bond levy, and the technology levy are the ones that are borne by the property taxpayers. And we do try really hard to equalize that as well, because it shouldn't depend on where a student lives, how their zip code is, how they're educated. So we do levy equalization, which I was hoping to do a little bit more of this year, but stay tuned for next year. And that's to help property poor districts be able to buy down that levy so it doesn't affect their taxpayers as much. So just a reminder that more than the majority of our funding comes from the general fund for our schools. That's something that we put in place in the late 70s or early 80s, just to make sure that we had our schools funded by the state general fund. What you will notice in this is an indexing the basic formula to inflation. And that is what's going to make all the difference in the world for our schools to have that stable funding. Because we don't do that, they fall behind year after year after year below inflation. And that base funding gets smaller and smaller for the needs that they have. That puts the pressure on the excess operating levies for districts to go out for more money. So by stabilizing funding in the base, we're hoping to actually lower property taxes with this bill, the way we put funding in. When it comes to the unemployment insurance, school districts are different when it comes to unemployment. They do not have a tax rate or an experience rate that they pay in. It's a reimbursement for those who take unemployment. And they have a levy that they can go tap into if they need to. We cap that levy so it wouldn't affect property taxes. And what we're asking the districts to do is because we don't know how many people will actually qualify for unemployment. If a district offers a job in the summer to help catch kids up, or tutoring in math or science, or do summer school, that person does not qualify for unemployment if they decline that job. So with the reimbursement, putting money into account and tying it up is not going to help anybody, and it's not going to help our schools because it would just sit there by itself. So we're waiting to see what that interaction looks like. And then to go to the point, and I keep hearing the word, I've heard 60, I've heard 65, I've heard 55 unfunded mandates. I would seriously, and I've been having direct conversation with school districts, give me a list. Because the mandates that we put in here, like the more time for sped teachers to work on IEPs, we funded that. The non-exclusionary discipline pieces, we funded that. So I would really offline love to see a list of what those unfunded mandates are, because I keep seeing this moving number, which is kind of feel like Lucy with the football and actually Charlie more than Lucy. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll be happy to work on that. I think that's important. I'm just, and I know I'm trying to stick to the tax provisions of the bill, not the policy. Again, what would a school district do to make up for the $135 million cost of the potential of the unemployment benefits, since they can't levy for it because that's specifically restricted in the bill? Is there any indication that the state would put more money in here to cover that?
Representative Youakim.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you, Representative Anderson. As I said before, this is a reimbursement. Districts could keep their employees on for the needs, the drastic needs their kids have to keep up, which I've heard from both sides of the aisle. Districts could make sure that their employees are offered summer programming, and if they decline it, they don't qualify for unemployment. And like I said, we are not sure if the estimate's even right, because we don't know how many people would actually qualify for that. And since it's a reimbursement and not a rate change, we're waiting to see how that interaction happens. We are giving districts more money in this bill and waiting to see how they spend that. And we're putting a lot of it on the general fund, which gives them local control and flexibility to decide what they need in their district.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Representative Swedzinski, to the tax provisions in the bill, please, on 2497.
Thank you. So just kind of talking about the local tax provision in this bill. So this bill will the local school boards wouldn't have to go to their taxpayers in this bill if they were to re-up a levy, an operation levy? Is that, or whichever part I'm talking about, is that, did I hear that correctly?
Representative Swedzinski. Okay. Representative Youakim.
Okay, I think you're talking about Representative Frazier's automatic levy renewal, and that's only on the local operation excess levy. Not all districts, one, have those. Two, it's only extending a levy that's currently in place. And if they're going to do more than that, they have to go back to the taxpayer.
Representative Swedzinski.
So it's a little kind of, a philosopher deja vu all over again. I think it was Yogi Berra that said that. So the last bill we heard with Representative Howard was not going back, not encouraging to go back to voters to whether to approve these tax increases. And it sounds like that's the same in this bill. So thank you.
Representative Youakim.
Thank you. And to that provision too, just as a reminder, cities can do this. Cities have levy authority. For some reason, even though our school boards have the same election certificate, they're not allowed to do that. So I encourage you to talk to your local school boards to see how they feel about this as well.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion to House File 2497? Seeing none, Chair Youakim, any closing comments for us?
Yes, I would just like to say, members, this is a really well-rounded and well-balanced bill. We took into account discussions for months and even before that from our schools, from our administrators, from our teachers, from everybody that works with our kids in and outside of our school with after-school programming. I think there's something in here for everybody to love. It reflects every corner of our state and is a product that we really can be proud of. And members, I would appreciate your support as we move this bill and its historic investment into the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you so much. With that, Representative Youakim will renew her motion that House File 2497, the first engrossment as amended, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Motion prevails, and House File 2497, the first engrossment as amended, is re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. So now we're going to recess until about 30 minutes after floor session. We'll take up House File 2887 when we return, and we are in recess. Thank you, everybody.